Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ann Palmer from the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's conversation. Thank you all for joining us for this next step following the public launch of the Intentional Spaces Roadmap at the Global Wellness Institute's New York Media event. We're grateful to see such a broad cross-sector audience here today, including leaders from design, health, research, philanthropy, and the arts, because this work truly sits at the intersection of so many fields. We're joined today by an exceptional group of speakers who bring complementary perspectives to this conversation. Kara Hourihan of the Pedersen Foundation, Nancy Davis of the Global Wellness Institute, and Susan Magsamen from the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University. We're also pleased to be joined during the moderated Q&A by members of the Pedersen Collaborative, including Dr. Susan Chung of HKS Architecture and Dr. Margaret Tarampi from the University of Hartford and the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture. Over the past several years, there's been a growing recognition that the environments we create, from healthcare and workplace settings to public and cultural spaces, play a meaningful role in shaping human health, behavior, connection, and well-being. The Intentional Spaces initiative emerged from this shared recognition and from a desire to bring together research, practice, and lived experience into a more coordinated approach. The roadmap itself is intended not as a finished product, but as a strategic framework, one designed to support alignment across sectors and help move this emerging field from conversation toward implementation. Today's session is really about that transition, how collaboration, investment, and shared leadership can help translate this work into practice. To support that, we've designed our time today to move from shared context into conversation. We'll begin with brief perspectives from our speakers, each offering a different lens on why this moment matters and why collective action is needed now. Susan Magsamen will then share a history of the Intentional Spaces movement and an overview of the roadmap. Following the presentations, we'll move into a moderated Q&A, beginning with a few questions for members of the Pedersen Collaborative, and then open the conversation to audience as time allows. You're welcome to submit questions at any point during the session using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll do our best to address as many as we can. To kick things off, it's my pleasure to introduce Kara Hourihan, Executive Director of the Pedersen Foundation. The work of the Intentional Spaces Initiative is supported by the Pedersen Foundation, and the Pedersen Foundation also leads the Intentional Spaces Collaborative, which brings together the Milken Institute, HKS Architecture, and the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture, along with the International Arts and Mind Lab. Each partner contributes a unique perspective to help build and advance this emerging field. Kara will share the Pedersen Foundation perspective on why investment in this work matters now and the role philanthropy can play in supporting long-term field building and implementation. Kara, thank you for being with us today. I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Hourihan, the Executive Director of the Pedersen Foundation, and it's a genuine honor to help open the Intentional Spaces Roadmap today. For the Pedersen Foundation, this moment has been more than two decades in the making. Marilyn Pedersen, co-founder of the International Arts and Mind Lab, has been a persistent and visionary champion of neuroaesthetics long before most of the world knew the word. She believes that beauty, design, and its connection to the built environment are not merely built for function or for aesthetics. They can act as a biological force to shape human potential. Today, the science is catching up to that conviction. And we're at an inflection point, a renaissance, so to speak. For years, we've understood you are what you eat. Nutrition shapes your brain. But now we are at the beginning to understand something equally profound. You are also shaped by the spaces you inhabit, biologically, cognitively, emotionally. The built environment is not a neutral backdrop to human life. It is an active force interacting with the brain and the nervous system, influencing stress, attention, mood, creativity, and performance. A growing body of evidence confirms what many designers and researchers have long sensed. Some environments reliably support human flourishing, while others quietly or not so quietly undermine it. That is why investment in neuroarchitecture matters now. We are at the very beginning of a paradigm shift in how we think about the role of the built environment. For centuries, buildings have been evaluated on function, safety, cost, and aesthetics. Today, we can add an additional question. How does this environment affect human physiology and cognition? And increasingly, we have the scientific tools to answer it. Neuroarchitecture is not only interdisciplinary, it's cross-sectoral, from neuroscience, architecture, interior design, immunology, engineering, behavioral science, industry, and public health, to name a few. Because of that, progress cannot happen with a single discipline. It requires field building, and field building takes time and intention. It means developing shared language so neuroscientists and architects can understand one another. It means establishing agreed upon methodologies and evidence that builds upon itself. It means creating implementation tools that practitioners want to use. And it means building educational pathways so the next generation enters the field with understanding and a natural direction on how to move forward. And critically, no single sector can do it alone. Researchers generate evidence, but designers implement it. Local government, developers, and industry shape what gets built. Each brings a different lens, and when those lenses align, that's when research moves from insight to practice. The Intentional Spaces Roadmap is a step towards that alignment. It's a coordinated mechanism, a shared framework for building this field with rigor, collaboration, and long-term commitment. At the Pedersen Foundation, we believe that human flourishing should not be accidental. It should be intentional. The spaces we build today will shape the health, cognition, and well-beings of generations to come. Thank you all for being here and for being part of this work.
Thank you so much, Kara. Next, we'll hear from Nancy Davis, founder of the Global Wellness Institute, a partner in helping to bring the Intentional Spaces work into a broader global conversation about health, well-being, and the built environment. The roadmap was publicly launched at the Global Wellness Institute's media event in January, and we're so grateful for Nancy's partnership in helping introduce this work to the global well-being community. Nancy brings decades of experience in strategic communications and has played a central role in expanding the global reach of the Global Wellness Summit and the Global Wellness Institute through events and initiatives that advance the well-being movement worldwide. Nancy will help frame why this movement matters and why this community is uniquely positioned to help lead what comes next. Nancy, over to you.
And thank you so much. And I just want to say that, Kara, you and I could have written the same remarks because we are so aligned. It's just incredible. And I think a real demonstration of the collaboration we are embarking on. Really, really proud and pleased to be part of this. In 2018, the nonprofit Global Wellness Institute released a report titled Build Well to Live Well. At the time, it was groundbreaking. It established the first global framework for defining wellness real estate and offered the first comprehensive measurement of the market across regions and countries. At its core was a simple but powerful premise. The places where we spend our time profoundly influence how we feel, function, and flourish. What none of us fully anticipated was the velocity of change that would follow. The pandemic did more than disrupt routines, it awakened awareness. Air quality, daylight, access to green space, density, walkability, social connection. These were no longer peripheral considerations. They became central to how people evaluated their homes, offices, schools, and communities. And yet, even with this momentum, there remained a lingering misconception that designing for well-being was synonymous with luxury, that it was about premium finishes and trendy features. It is not. The spaces we inhabit represent one of the most scalable platforms for advancing human health across income levels, geographies, and generations. When we updated our research last year with Build Well to Live Well, the Future, we expanded the lens. We synthesized a rapidly growing body of evidence linking the built environment to physical vitality, mental clarity, social connection, financial stability, civic engagement, and environmental stewardship. We outlined 6 dimensions of well-being that can be intentionally embedded into development projects. We documented impact studies across residential, commercial, and mixed-use settings. And we identified tangible opportunities for growth, not at the margins, but at the center of how communities are planned and financed. All of this points to a defining moment. The knowledge base is strong, market appetite is rising, investors are paying attention. What's required now is cohesion, translating insight into standards, metrics, financing models, and everyday practice. And this is where Susan Magsamen's work is so essential. For decades, many designers understood intuitively that aesthetics matter, that proportion, texture, light, sensory richness all influence human experience. But intuition does not move systems. Through her leadership at the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University, Susan has helped establish the scientific foundation, demonstrating that artistic and sensory experiences are biologically consequential. They influence neural pathways, stress response, learning capacity, emotional regulation, and long-term resilience. In other words, environment is not backdrop, it's biology. That reframes how we think about housing, schools, workplaces, healthcare settings, and about cities themselves. Our newly announced partnership, including an upcoming design challenge, is about operationalizing this understanding. It asks, how do we align neuroscience, design thinking, and development practice to measurably support human flourishing? How do we ensure this work is inclusive, scalable, and economically sound? And perhaps more importantly, why us? Because this community, all of us, represent a rare convergence of expertise: research, architecture, finance, policy, healthcare, and culture. As Kara beautifully said, no single discipline can advance this alone. It requires cross-sector leadership willing to rethink the role of environment in prevention, productivity, and longevity. This is not incremental improvement. It is a structural evolution. If we spend nearly 90% of our lives indoors, then the quality of those environments is one of the most powerful determinants of our collective future. Which brings us now to the person who has helped give this movement both scientific rigor and visionary clarity. Susan Magsamen is one of the leading global voices advancing the understanding that arts, beauty, and sensory experience are foundational to health and human potential. As the founding executive director of the International Arts and Mind Lab, she has translated cutting-edge neuroscience into actionable insight, influencing healthcare systems, educational institutions, urban planning, and workplace strategy. What makes Susan extraordinary is her ability to bridge worlds: research and practice, creativity and policy, culture and economics, and to articulate why these connections matter, not just for well-being, but for innovation and long-term value creation. At a time when health is central to economic resilience and societal strength, Susan brings both evidence and imagination to the table. It's my great pleasure to introduce Susan, but I understand that before she comes on your screen, we have a short video to play. Thanks very much.
It's so good to be here today. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to begin this journey together. I wanted to play that video because I don't know for you all on the Zoom, but it's very rare that we have 2.5 minutes to just sit and reflect and be in the space that we're in. And I think the work that we're talking about today is so important. I know for me initially, I'm jittery. I'm like, let's go, let's go. I got to check the list. But sitting and being in a space changes us. So I hope that your cortisol is a little lower, and we'll go ahead and move into a conversation about the Intentional Spaces Roadmap, which I'm thrilled to offer to you today. So Kara and Nancy, the Pedersen Foundation and the Global Wellness Institute, it is such an honor to partner with you and all of the other organizations that we have been truly blessed to work with over the last 20 years. And in many ways, the work that we've done has brought us to this moment. And so I want to just briefly share a little bit of my reflections on Marilyn Pedersen. Kara mentioned the Pedersen family, but it was in 2004 that Marilyn Pedersen and her husband George wanted to make a gift to Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine to better understand the brain. And she had one request, which was to study the power of the arts and aesthetic experiences and their role on human physiology. And you can imagine at that time, a lot of folks scratched their heads and said, the arts, how would we study the arts? And the work was only just beginning through work of Samir Zeki in London. But the work that I'm sharing today would not have been possible without Marilyn's vision. And we owe a great debt to her for her vision and for her tenacity and her resilience. So 22 years later, we are standing on the verge of a cultural shift where the arts, architecture, and aesthetics can deliver potent, accessible, proven health and well-being solutions to billions of people. And it is happening. At the IAM Lab, Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics, our mission has always been to amplify human potential through the study and translation of the arts and aesthetic experiences. And we do that in 4 primary ways. The first is research. The second is field leadership, community building, education, and outreach. And while philosophers, artists, and I think children have always known the power of the arts and aesthetics, it's only really been in the last 30 years that we've been able to non-invasively get inside our heads to study the extraordinary ways that the arts impact us. Data science and AI are also now enhancing this ability in amazing ways through looking at data sets and other ways to really understand what's happening. So neuroaesthetics is the study of how arts and aesthetic experiences measurably change our brains, body, and behavior. And importantly, how this knowledge can be translated into practices that advance physical and mental health, well-being, learning, and public health. So by design, it is not only interdisciplinary, it is also a translational emerging field. And we're rapidly learning how the arts and aesthetics simultaneously alter a complex physiological and neurological interconnected network of biological systems. So when you think about things like respiration or your circulatory system, even immune and muscular systems, along with higher order brain functions like cognition, reward, and motor. And this knowledge is really becoming accessible to many sectors: education, healthcare, thinking about public health and community development, but really importantly for today's conversation, the way we're thinking about this work in the human-built environment. And so what is neuroarts? Neuroarts is an interdisciplinary field that is rooted in the science of neuroaesthetics and other ways of knowing. And we are working to make arts and aesthetics part of mainstream medicine, public health, and society. So what Nancy so beautifully said is that this is not incremental change. We are talking about being a systems catalyst and literally changing the way structures are operating in the world today. And it lies at the intersection of arts, health, science, and technology. And the field is accelerated in every single sector, from business, arts and culture, healthcare, education, public health, architecture, urban planning, and design. And these are just a few of the partners that we've been working with over the last several years to really amplify and accelerate this work. But I like to think about the metaphor of the elephant in the room, which I think is very relevant. The first thing is that these creative experiences and expressions are ancient, they're evolutionary, and they're powerful like the elephant. Secondly, depending upon where you touch the elephant, you're going to get something different. And depending on where you touch this arts and aesthetics work for different purposes, you're going to get different results. If you're touching it for Parkinson's, you're probably going to get dance. If you're touching it for Alzheimer's, for sure, autobiographical music and other kinds of sound may emerge. Mental health, there's a whole mixed modal opportunity for thinking about expressive writing and more. The third thing I want to say about the elephant is that it represents a cautionary tale. If we do not nurture and protect the arts and aesthetic experiences in all of the sectors we work in, we will lose them. And this is going to be at great peril to humanity. But the timing couldn't be better for the world to really bring neural arts forward. The World Economic Forum has stated that humanity's core must be met by a blend of technological advancements and also profound ethical, social, and environmental responsibility that will foster a future that prioritizes collective well-being over pure economic expansion. And I think the irony of this is that when we invest in neural arts, economic analyses are consistently showing savings and also a true value return on investment. So it turns out that arts and culture in all of its forms are important pillars for whole health and wellness, like good nutrition, exercise, sleep, and of course, being in nature, which I think is the highest aesthetic form of art. And architecture and design are fundamental and they are core for this domain. You know, when you think about it, you are in a space all the time, whether you're in your head, whether you're in virtual reality, or whether you are in a physical space every moment of your life. And that makes a huge opportunity to really advance human flourishing. So to better understand the unique role of environments, in the spring of 2019, my colleague and co-author of Your Brain on Art, Ivy Ross, and I had an opportunity to put neuroaesthetic principles into action in real time to illustrate the effects of sensory perception on our bodies in an exhibit called A Space for Being in Milan through a collaboration with Google and architect Suchi Reddy. This led to the first international Intentional Spaces Summit in Washington, D.C. in 2023 at the Bloomberg Center. And the goal of the summit was to bring all stakeholders together, from designers to researchers to contractors to policymakers, funders, and developers, to set the course for the future. These 10 themes emerged from the summit to offer a powerful foundation of insights that were rooted in diverse expertise and lived experience. I'm not going to read these, but you can certainly see that they cover the spectrum from education to equity and inclusion to generating and applying research evidence and developing adaptive tools for evaluation for the future. So these 10 guiding principles have really been the foundation to what we are now bringing forward in terms of the NeuroArts roadmap. So re-enter the Pedersen Foundation, the same family 22 years ago that believed spaces and places could change the world. In 2025, they formed the Neuroaesthetics Collaborative with the key change makers that were mentioned earlier, the Academy of Neuroscience of Architecture, the Milken Institute, HKS Architects, and my lab. And each partner does bring a unique sort of superpower, from things like investment strategies with Milken to Building Brains Coalition and SuperY from HKS and more. And this group of collaborators are also growing as this work begins to be shared around the world. All of these initiatives over the last 7 years have led to the launch of the Intentional Spaces Roadmap. It is a comprehensive strategic plan to build the field of intentional design that aligns efforts across sectors and disciplines, advances interdisciplinary research, provides direction for implementation, investment, and policy, and advances intentional design as a driver for human health, equity, and well-being. The roadmap's full set of recommendations is organized into 5 core recommendations. These are broad focus zones that are designed to guide implementation, investment, and collaboration. So they include enhancing basic and translational research and diverse ways of knowing. They also include expanding methods and technology to advance intentional spaces, generating economic and impact evidence, and also building capacity, leadership, and inclusion. Through the year, we will be activating the roadmap through a series of in-person, media, and virtual experiences that will culminate in a very special convening in Thailand through our partnership with the Global Wellness Summit. Our outcomes are clear: integrating traditional KPIs like energy performance, durability, cost effectiveness, with the development of new metrics that matter around health and human flourishing and other key performance indicators. Another outcome includes the interdisciplinary design with all stakeholders, and importantly, a shift in mindset, policy, and practice where design aligns with the science of how humans thrive. So you might be thinking, how could this actually manifest in the real world? Well, the good news is around the world, there are projects that have begun to embrace neuroarchitectural principles and design. And in the coming months, we'll be sharing more of these with you. But today, I want to offer one that I'm extremely honored to work with. The North Star of these 5 entities in Bentonville, conceived by Alice Walton, is the development of a collective ecosystem for health, well-being, learning, and community through art, architecture, nature, education, and wellness together. There is a world-class museum, performing arts center, medical school, and policy institute on a campus in the middle of the Arkansas's wooden landscape. And it's an extraordinary example of neuroaesthetics coming together in a community environment. But there's more. Alice is now building an expanded new world-class evidence-based healthcare campus informed by neuroaesthetic principles, with an innovation focus on wellness in healthcare settings, but also in the rural community. So it's a really exciting opportunity to watch something come from the ground up related to neuroarchitecture. And this is well underway. But I think Alice really says it best. The spaces around us matter. They impact our daily lives and our health and well-being. Integrating the arts and nature into my own self-care has had a profound impact. And she invites us. I hope that providing access to these experiences on this beautiful campus will be transformative for everyone who spends time here. So please take a screenshot of this QR code. It will take you to the roadmap on the Intentional Spaces website. And I'm excited to share this foundational first step in building the Intentional Spaces work with you today. And finally, for more information about many of the initiatives that are informing this work and the larger field of neuroarts, I hope you'll visit the NeuroArts Resource Center. It offers many resources for you to learn and, importantly, to share your work with others. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Susan, so much. I would love to invite our speakers and actually Dr. Susan Chung and Dr. Margaret Tarampi will be joining our Q&A session right now. And remind everyone, please go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A chat. We will have some time to review them and start the conversation as we move into this next section of the webinar. But I really want to thank all of our speakers for helping set the stage for this conversation. And as we move into our moderated Q&A, we'd like to begin with a few questions for our panelists and members of the Pedersen Collaborative who have been really closely engaged in supporting this work. And then we'll open the conversation to the broader audience. All right, so I'm actually going to start with Nancy. And Nancy, we know how much of this work is already happening across sectors and certainly at the Global Wellness Institute. But from your vantage point within the global wellness movement, what helps move these ideas from inspiration into real decision making? And where do you see the greatest opportunities or challenges as this work continues to gain momentum?
Okay, well, first of all, fantastic webinar presentations. I'm thrilled to be part of all of this. The alignment is just absolutely incredible. There's no shortage of inspiration, but that does not automatically translate into decision making. From my vantage point, I think there are really three things that move ideas into action. And the first one is evidence. We hear this all the time. Decision makers need measurable outcomes. When we can demonstrate that healthier environments improve cognitive performance, reduce absenteeism, increase asset value, or strengthen demand, the conversation shifts from philosophy to strategy. We hear that from a lot of our partners at the Global Wellness Institute and the Global Wellness Summit. We know a lot of things intuitively, and we know things that we experience ourselves, but being able to prove them is really what moves the needle. And the next thing is economic framing. I think, wellness can't be positioned as a luxury item. It's got to be understood as risk mitigation, workforce strategy, resilience planning, long-term value creation. And when it's framed that way, the money moves, capital moves. And we've seen this time and again. And third, and this is where Susan's work is just invaluable, is that clear implementation is critical. So people ask, where do we start? How do we do this? What standards apply? It's bridging those aspirations with practical roadmaps, if you will, that's so critical. So in terms of the opportunity, I think the biggest is mainstreaming, ensuring the work happens at every scale and every price point, not just at a high end. And the greatest challenge, I have to say, is still fragmentation. I think health, finance, design, policy still operate to a great extent in silos. So moving forward really does require integration. The good news is the momentum is absolutely real. Sometimes I wake up and feel bowled over by the momentum as my inbox explodes. The demand is definitely here. The science has caught up. And now the responsibility and the opportunity is to turn that into real change, systems level change. I do just want to also mention in a shameless plug that the Global Wellness Institute gives away all of its research. So if you are looking to download and read the reports that we have written about the built environment and about mental wellness and about all the things we've been talking about today, just go on our globalwellnessinstitute.org website to research and download it all. It's we that helps us meet our mission to empower wellness worldwide by giving this information away so people can really have access and understand what we understand. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, no shame in that plug, Nancy. It is
Nope.
it is incredible resource center, and everyone should definitely tap into it. I would like to open the question up to the rest of the panel if you would like to add anything in terms of how we're going from ideas into action, and maybe more specifically to Margaret and Susan. When we think about really as the work continues to take shape, where do you see the most promising opportunities for early pilots or demonstration projects that could help the field learn together? Where are the ripe areas of research? Margaret and Susan Chung, would you like to start there?
Sure. I actually just wanted to kind of build on what Nancy had said earlier, because there's a lot
Please.
of things that she said that I also, as someone who is trained both as an architect and as a cognitive neuroscientist, I think in terms of decision making, translation, obviously across the disciplines is so important. And I'm a huge advocate for turning compelling neuroscience into tools for designers, developers, healthcare leaders, and policymakers that they can actually use. Some of the things that Kara was saying earlier as well. I think also translation across timescales, because neuroscience tends to generate really nuanced probabilistic insights, while architecture and development often require kind of early, more concrete decisions. Um, I think what would help with this is in terms of like bridging the gap, is framing the brain sciences not as kind of abstract evidence, but as design relevant knowledge. So again, echoing the need for shared metrics and frameworks and case studies that demonstrate both human value and also economic value. I think we have to be practical as well. And that's something that I'm learning. As an academic, I think it's hard for me to not think about the purity of my research, but rather in this space, we really need to think about this work as a systems issue and not something that is a feature or an add-on. So when leaders, I think, understand that environments shape stress regulation, attention, social connection, recovery, etc., then hopefully those insights are going to influence upstream decisions like daylighting, material choices, site selection, right? That's when the neuroscience becomes really actionable.
I can build on that and say that I also believe in the power of shared experiences. Nancy mentioned, we spend 90% of our time indoors. If you think about it, we're always in interaction with the built environment, whether we are spending the 90% of our time indoors, or even if we're outdoors looking at streetscapes or building facades. Everywhere we go, we are interacting with some form of a built environment. So architecture definitely plays a role in how we're just spending our day, right? And hoping that day is supported with health and well-being. And in doing so, we do need that kind of cross-sector collaboration, which has been beautifully set up by the Pedersen Foundation and the collaborative, but also through the work of why we're here together. And I think it gets into, with that shared experience, understanding who are we really addressing with. So as we're thinking about these pilot projects or these demonstrative projects as well, it's understanding what's the best path to reach the people that we do need to reach. I'm going to actually borrow Kara's framing from a previous meeting that we had for what HKS is working on called Project Y, and really understanding how buildings make us feel, but framing it as, what do we want to communicate with the general audience on? This is the experience that you have, and bringing that awareness. But you also need to have the evidence, the really scientific portions with the scientific audience as well, to understand that architecture, there is something there. It's not just the nuance piece, but we do have the evidence, and there is the science behind it. But also the student audience, which I think is ripe. And I think just thinking about the future generation, what can we start to see right now, or has already been seeded through existing literature? How do we build upon that so the students that are furthering the knowledge and really developing the future, or creating the path to the future, what can we equip them with the project that we have? So at HKS, through Project Y, we're exploring those different avenues, having crowdsourced surveys to understand really from the public what are some spaces that are making us feel certain ways, and we've identified awe, belonging, and creativity to be part of that. doing experimental studies with facades, building facades, and also partnering with a commercial real estate developer and understanding, okay, really, where do we have agency to really push the boundaries around regulations and designing our buildings. And then also creating that shared experience once again through an exhibit to not just invite the public, but also layer that with scientific evidence and being able to build the body of knowledge there. So I think there's definitely a lot of places to pull these, but thinking about who we're trying to address, that audience, is definitely a key component.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I think sometimes if I was a musical instrument, I would be a drum, because the rhythm of all of these things are so important, and it really is a story that we're telling here, right? And we're at a moment in time in this incredible story. And two points I wanted to make. One is that science is not finite. Science is an ongoing thing. Evidence gets woven through every one of these sectors, and it changes as technology changes, as we build on the shoulders of the science that has come before. And so it isn't that we have the evidence. It's not, you don't go from A to B to C. It really is a rhythm. And the science is going to continue to grow for all of these different ways of understanding the human physiology, because we now have some tools, and those tools are going to get better and better. We want to build this field, and we think that when we build spaces and places, healthcare. Someone said to me recently, my son is coming into an outpatient mental health space. And every time he gets to the doorway, to the threshold, and there's a long white hall with no paintings or no color on it, his body literally freezes up. We can change that, right? We know what makes someone feel an induction into a transformative experience, right? Set and setting. And so, but what I wanted to say is that while we're going to build this field, the other part of the communications piece of the story is you don't have to wait. Like, there are things that we know right now that each of us can do in our own environments. And so part of this implementation strategy is to really stage gate. What can we do now? What can we do in a month? What are we trying to do in the next 2 years? In what constituency? In what sector? And so this implementation of this roadmap is really a communal effort, but it also it needs to be staged and timed. And so that's also really important, where we all are part of that narrative that unfolds. And, twists and turns like any journey. You think it's going to go well, but all of a sudden, oh, there's an avalanche. And so you got to go around the mountain. But we know that, and we love it. And in building neural arts, we've seen that. And we've seen that if the North Star is sustainability, the path is, you think you got a strategy, but there's also opportunity. And I think that's part of what's exciting about this work.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. We're getting some really wonderful and very aligned questions in our Q&A. I want to ask one more question specifically to Kara, and then we're going to move over into some of the wonderful questions that we're receiving from all of you. But Kara, as we're thinking from a philanthropic perspective, as early evidence-based pilots and demonstration projects begin to emerge, what does philanthropy need to invest in this work, and particularly when a field is still evolving and learning in real time?
I would say there's a few things. I mean, obviously, convening and bringing people together, we need to be able to start talking and having conversation and creating ideas and understanding where some needs and issues where neuroarchitecture or neuroaesthetics could make a difference, and finding a group of people to come together and talk about how could we put together some research to gather evidence. And I think Nancy said this so very clearly, and it is truly the beginning, is that we have to have the ideas and the needs, and then we need to turn it into evidence that then can be brought through, translated into the different areas that create meaningful conversations that then motivate to move to potentially build something with the evidence in mind, or build more evidence on the evidence, right? Um, but it takes a group of passionate people who are interested in solving a potential issue with neuroaesthetics in mind, and being able to bring that forward. And from a philanthropic standpoint, it's being able to help fuel that evidence, and looking at how do, we share methodologies? How do we start to fund different issues, and doing pilots that are not incredibly expensive, but can have a meaningful outcome that can then build upon itself to hopefully, turnkey to a potential project. Um, I think philanthropy doesn't need to be this incredibly expensive piece, but it needs to be a supportive piece for all of you that are here on this call today, that are passionate and interested, to be able to get your ideas out and find some folks and figure out what's the issue, what's the hypothesis, who do I need to be together, and what's the methodology, put it together, and hopefully be able to, bring some research proposals together to be able to then start to build the evidence, and so it goes. I
Yeah.
think that's philanthropy is here to be this support, and hopefully, the Pedersen Foundation and the Pedersen Collaborative, is helping be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt in my mind. I want to turn to, we have, just under 10 minutes left. And so I definitely want to turn to some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A. And a common theme that I'm seeing here that, Susan, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, because it's one of the things that is outlined in the roadmap, which is how education is envisioned within this initiative. And the question is how those of us working in academia and education might become involved and contribute meaningfully.
That's a great question, and it is absolutely integral to the current pipeline, and also thinking about people that are in the field in terms of professional development. So both areas of early career folks and longer term training. So most recently, through the NeuroArts Blueprint Initiative, we launched something called the NeuroArts Academic Network. And currently there are 40 universities from around the world that are working at the intersection of arts, aesthetics, architecture in some way. Some of them have programs, some of them just have a class, or they are considering the development of something more broadly. And we have been working with them for the last year to identify what are the core priorities for training. So for example, what is the science that needs to happen from a curricular level? Where are the challenges with administration in bringing these programs forward? What are the funding opportunities? And we have a whole host of areas that we've identified. So as part of, we're calling it the NAN, as part of the NAN, we will be addressing neural architecture in that space in a community. And what we found is that this group of now almost 40 universities really are sharing a lot of best practices with each other. We're about ready to launch a survey with over 500 universities that are either have programs or are interested in starting programs. And so to get more information about what the needs are and what are some of the assets and opportunities and challenges. And so as it relates specifically to neural architecture or arts and design, we will ultimately, I think, have a cohort of institutions that are specifically focused on this sector. But it's really important that we look at it across the academic preparation into career and then changes as the field is growing. And I should also say that AIA has been a really great partner in thinking, being a thought partner from the very beginning and looking at the intentional spaces work, as has AMFA, who has been developing programs. And I think there's many other institutions that could really add knowledge to how we think about that moving forward.
Thank you, Susan. I have another question here that I would like to open up to the group. Nancy, I feel like you're going to jump on this one quickly, but I would definitely like to get everyone's thoughts on this because I think it's a very provocative and important question. What risks do you see in neuroaesthetics becoming a premium design layer? And how can the field ensure that aesthetic environments supporting nervous system regulation are equitably distributed?
Okay. Well, I would say that in the work that we've been doing and the research we've been doing, we're not finding that that is the case. There's a lot of mixed use. There's a lot of public housing. There's a lot of locations that we've been looking at and studying that employ the same kinds of considerations and priorities as high-end residential in New York. So I think it is becoming much more democratic in terms of its application. And I think that's, it's kind of on us to do that, to make sure that that information, it's why we give away our research, why that information needs to get out there. It's not, we have found over the years doing all the kinds of research we've done, it's not very expensive to ensure that you step outside into nature. It's not that expensive to, there are ways to bring all kinds of sort of, I don't know, ways to improve your well-being into any kind of space you're in. And it doesn't have to be an added on, implemented thing. It can just be a mindset. It can be what you allow to happen. The more you know, if people are educated, they will make different decisions. And also, people are demanding these kinds of things. I know my colleague and friend Whitney Gray is on this call from the International Well-Building Institute. And we just concluded a bunch of case studies in the UAE and some of them with Whitney's colleagues. And a lot of these studies about how spaces are being constructed and developed were not at the high end, and they contained all of the things we're talking about. So it is happening. It is happening on a global scale. Another question came up about how this seemed US centric. I will say that everything we do is incredibly global. We have case studies in the UK. We're about to release in May the case studies in the GCC. This is happening all over the world. And the more education there is, the more this will trickle down and be part of what everyone can have access to. And that's the beauty of it. That was a long answer. Sorry.
No, that was fantastic. I have one more question. Oh, please, Susan.
I was going to say really, really quickly,
Please.
Nancy alluded to this, but the integration between financing and housing is also happening, and thinking about low-income housing and communities being able to buy in at a fair market value. It's huge, and it's happening all over the world. And there's a group called I'm going to get this wrong. I'll put it in the chat. That actually has been working in the slums in Africa and has built a community center that has changed the lives of thousands of people by simply having fresh water in the community and a place to wash their clothes. And so, there are ways that this work can elevate many areas by simple targeted interventions. And so it's sort of exciting to see that this is not for the top 1%. I think it can't be.
And just, following on that thought for 1 minute, it is the more the places in the world where there is not obvious access to the kinds of things that we are sometimes talking about. They have figured out that their own indigenous cultures, the assets that are part of their everyday life and work, those are the most important things. And we're trying to learn that. And we're trying to adapt that and absorb that, but they inherently they just know that because that is what they've never stopped being surrounded by nature. They've never stopped having intergenerational living. They've never stopped doing the things that we are now creating and revisiting and reminding ourselves are important. They've never stopped knowing they were important in certain parts of the world.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to give Margaret and Susan Chung a 1 minute speed round question. You're going to hate me for this, but can you talk about just briefly or name off a couple of practical ways you can implement research into the design process, even some tools or a lightning round where someone might start if they are just wanting to access more research in their design principles?
Well, since Margaret took the first one first, I can take this one first. I think it gets into what we call at HKS linking design outcomes. So making sure that once you understand the design challenge, really doing your research, right? So you do want that evidence. There are great resources out there. I will give another plug to the International Wellbeing Institute, especially when you're doing architectural projects, that they have a very robust list of its standards, but they're all evidence backed up. So just looking into that gives you a great resource and education in doing so. I think resources for design guidelines and principles, again, based on what your focus area is, there are plenty out there. So doing a simple search. I'll still do a plug for HKS. HKS, come to our website, do a search, and you'll see guidelines and some design strategies that we've applied, and also report from our research findings too. So I think it's not just the resources that are out there, but these conversations. Right? Never underestimate like just picking up a phone and calling and asking, okay, well, where are these resources, or reaching out via email.
I'm gonna also plug HKS. Their Building Brains State of the Field review. I think that's a great place if you want to get just a start on understanding what aspects of the built environment and the natural environment might have impact on health and well-being. I think since I'm an author, I'm like also plugging myself, but I personally think it's a great resource for folks to get a wider overview of the field. And then I think there's many groups. IAM Lab has their mailing list. Building Brains Coalition has a mailing list. AMPA has a mailing list. All of these places are great to subscribe to, and then you can hear about things as they're coming out, the latest research, the latest collaborations, because I think that's what we really need to be on the pulse of what's happening across fields and cross sectors.
Thank you. And I want to be mindful of our time and thank you, especially to all of our speakers that joined us today. Thank all of you who have joined us live here for the webinar today. The Intentional Spaces Roadmap represents an invitation as much as a framework. And the next phase of this work really depends on continued collaboration across sectors. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. As we move the roadmap towards implementation planning in March, we invite you to stay engaged and share your perspectives as this work continues to evolve. And as Susan mentioned in her comments, that this will be evolving throughout the coming year, convening additional workshops and collaborative working sessions and opportunities for other engagement. And we hope that we'll see many of you in that process. You will receive follow-up materials after today's webinar. Many of you were asking about that, including information on how to access the roadmap and ways to stay involved. And thank you again for being a part of this growing community. We look forward to continuing this work together as the next phase takes shape. Have a wonderful day.